Paul Rimmer and myself visit York. Paul talks about the history of York. We visit the Railway Museum. We visit York Minster Cathedral. It's a really good video and I hope you can watch it all the way through.
We're in York today on the banks of the River Ouse and we're looking again at Clifton Tower, which was the heart of York Castle. Most of the castle has been demolished. We've got these beautiful Georgian buildings here instead. But the tower remains a very bold tower on a really high mound. Quite an impressive structure. Well, we talked about the infamous death of the Jews there in 1190, which was during the Crusader period. It was the time of the Third Crusade when Richard the Lionheart was stirring up the people of England to go and fight for Christendom. And people thought in that battle for Christendom they were also fighting the Jews, because obviously the Jews were not part of the battle. In fact, during the First and Second Crusades, they had sided with the Turks in the Holy Land, and that had brought a lot of hostility to the Jews in this country. Now at this time, people were selling their land, they were raising funds to finance their membership with the Crusader army. But the Jews, of course, were not part of this campaign, this mission, and they were resented because of that. And attacks on the Jews began. Physical attacks, theft of their property. And these attacks across England spread eventually to York. And when the attacks began on the Jewish community in York, they fled into this tower here. They were still under the protection of the king, and the sheriff gave them permission to hide in this tower. And they gave them the key to lock themselves in, hoping that when the crowd had abated, he would release them. But when he came to release the Jews, they refused to leave the tower. Obviously, they were in fear of their lives. And they'd taken their valuables with them into the tower. Now, there was an incident at the foot of the tower where a preacher was killed by one of the Jewish captives throwing a rock at him. And that incensed the crowd further, and they began to attack the tower. And the Jews, in desperation, set their valuables on fire. And that fire consumed the whole of the tower, and the Jews died in the inferno. Some escaped. They climbed to the top of the tower and lowered themselves down. Some jumped to their death to escape the flames. But it was an infamous moment in English history. And this is the famous Clifton Tower. This is where it happened.
As Paul has already said, as tragic as this tower was, this is part of our history. And you know, the tragedy of the Jews that died in this tower, it's all part of our history. And you know, we should never forget that we've got a lot of history in this country. There's history all around this country. That tower there is 800 years old. Incredible, 800 years old. And you know, there's other stuff here in York that's even older than that tower, which we're going to look at now.
This is a mighty river, the River Ouse, which flows through York. There's something about England and its rivers and its shorelines. We love water. We love being close to water. It's in our DNA, as they say. We love the romance of the river. Of course, from this neck of the woods, some great maritime heroes came out. James Cook, Captain James Cook, sailed from North Yorkshire to the Pacific Ocean. Of course, he discovered Australia, Botany Bay, and he went to the Pacific Islands and lost his life on a Pacific island. An amazing journey he had. I mean, I always think of Captain James Cook's journeys as like a trip to the moon, because in those days he was going into an unknown wilderness, an unknown vastness, and yet he was from this neck of the woods, and local people from here explored the world. Of course, the world had come to York. We think of the Romans that came here as conquerors in the 1st century, and their great king, the Emperor Constantine, who was proclaimed emperor of the whole Roman Empire, which stretched across the known world. He was proclaimed emperor in this city of York. Just shows you how historic it is, how deep. And of course, once the Romans had gone, it was the Danes came. They brought their longships up this river and claimed this land as their own and made York their capital. They called it Jorvik, the town of the yew, the city of the yew tree. And There was a Danish kingdom here for over 200 years, and it's still there. It's still in the Yorkshire dialect, little bits of Norse and Danish. And when William the Conqueror came to England in 1066, defeated Harold at Hastings, the Battle of Hastings, he was crowned in London, and then he proclaimed himself king of the whole realm. But York dissented from that, and the Danes came here, and they set up their own kingdom as a rival to William. And it wasn't until 1069 that William the Conqueror got round to taking on this Danish kingdom of York. And he brought his troops north, and they began a process of almost extermination. It was called the harassing of the north, and he went about slaying anybody who refused to swear an oath of fealty to the king. And Norman rule, the Norman yoke was imposed on York in a very aggressive manner, very murderous manner. It's never been forgotten in this city. This city is ancient. You know, it shows you the roots of the English people, the deep roots of the English people, the ancient roots of our nation. We are an ancient people, and we've lived in this land, not just back to the times of the Normans and the Danes and the Romans, but before that. Even before the Celts. We've been here thousands of years. This is our territory. This is our water. This is sacred land, the land of England. Winston Churchill said, there's a name that means more to me than any others. A name, it's almost forbidden to speak now. The name of England. And York was at the centre of that realm. And we need to reconnect with our past in order to have a future, in order to conserve what belongs to us, because our nation is being taken off us. We're being dispossessed in city after city. Alien populations are being brought in through mass immigration who have no connection to our history and imposing their will upon us. It's a betrayal. It's a betrayal by our central government. Just as William came as a conqueror, we feel like we're being conquered again. We have to rise up against that. Just like Hereward the Wake and others rose up against the Norman yoke. And eventually, it took centuries, but English reimposed themselves in this country. The Normans tried to make us speak French. They tried to make us a Catholic nation, and for a time it appeared they succeeded. But the English never forgot their history, never forgot their own character and their own language. And eventually, we broke from Rome. We reimposed the English language on this land, and we made the English language the language of the world. This is a great nation, and it's a nation we should cherish. This is Micklegate, the south entrance to York, and the wall that surrounds the whole of York. It was built initially by the Romans, but it's been rebuilt many times since. Let's take a walk on the wall and look at the sights up here. Follow me. Onto the battlements, follow me. What strikes you about the walls of York is just how solid they are. I mean, these were built for defence. Obviously, England had many enemies. There was something of worth in York itself. They would have been built against the barbarians for the Romans, against the Vikings for the Saxons, against any renegades for the Normans, and then of course from the Scots. The Scots often came south to pillage and to loot, to claim territory. Even William Wallace came this far. And so the walls of York are incredibly thick, quite high as well. On top of that, they're in really good nick. I'm sure the Victorians did a job at restoring them. The Victorians loved to restore anything which was ancient, anything which was medieval. And these walls are still probably the most impressive walls in England. Chester, the walls of Chester are fantastic, and there's other walled cities in Wales like Conway, and the city of Rye In Sussex is another walled town. There's very few of them in England left. Berwick on the Scottish border is another walled town. Carlisle. But the walls were largely removed in the Georgian and Victorian period because they were no longer needed. And on top of that, they were a hindrance to the development of a town, to the expansion of a town. But these walls in York have survived, and it's great to see them, you know. You're walking in the footsteps of history. Thank you. It's when you come to places like York, you realise this is a sceptred isle. What that word means, it's a crown, it's an imperial place, England. It's full of glory. It's over 1,000 years. And we need to value that past. We need to keep England alive as a living nation. You know, looking forward to the future, but bringing our history with us, not separating ourselves from our history. The problem with the globalists is that they want to eradicate local traditions. They want to eradicate local culture and make us all this homogeneous global people. But that means we lose so much, because the culture they impose upon us will have no roots and will not be worth fighting for. But what we had here in England was a wonderful unfolding civilization which people were prepared to fight for, were prepared to die for. And we need to pass this on to future generations. That's the story of England, the story of this island, the story of Britain. You know, we're one people around these islands. We have a shared history which goes back thousands of years. We're one people in a genetic sense, that we've intermarried through the centuries, in a cultural sense that we were all Christian, even though there was a Catholic Protestant schism with the same people. And on top of that, we share the same English language, and we need to maintain the dignity and the independence of these islands. We need to stop the globalist agenda of stripping away our independence and what is unique about our culture here. When you come to places like York, you appreciate the depths of English culture. Can you imagine fighting on these battlements in days of old? When the attackers would bring their ladders up to the wall and try and scale the wall, and you'd pour hot oil upon them, or cast stones on them, or fire arrows at them, or hack them to death with your sword. It was gruesome battles in those days. That's what they called bloodbaths. The blood flowed and it stuck. And these walls have seen many battles. I mean, we're used to living in a very peaceful and serene nation of England. In fact, there has not been a battle on English soil between two armies since the Battle of Sedgemoor during the reign of James II, way back in the 1680s, 1685 I think it was. The Duke of Monmouth, the bastard son of Charles II, he rose in rebellion against the Catholic King James II, and he raised a pitchfork army, and they fought a battle at Sedgemoor in Somerset. Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe, was in Monmouth's army, which was defeated. But since that day, 1685, there hasn't been a battle fought on this land. So we're used to peace here, and we think peace will continue forever. But of course, history tells a different tale. In fact, history says this: only the dead have seen the end of war. And I've got a feeling now, as multiculturalism divides our nation and sets tribe against tribe, we'll see war in this land again, and these walls of York may yet see fresh action. Thank you. What were these great walls at York defending? Here's the answer: the Minster, York Minster. One of the two greatest churches in England. Of course, during the time of Roman Catholicism, England was divided into two provinces: the province of Canterbury and the province of York. And the last Cardinal of York was Thomas Wolsey, Henry VIII's famous Chancellor of the Exchequer, head of the church, head of the government, a man of immense power. He was returning from York to London, called back by Henry VIII to negotiate his divorce when he died. Henry VIII was very disappointed with Wolsey because he could not win for him divorce from Catherine of Aragon. And so Wolseley came under a lot of pressure, and that pressure told, and eventually he died of a heart attack. And York ceased to be a province of the Roman Church and became a bishopric, the Archbishop of York, number 2 in the Church of England. It maintained its ecclesiastical power, but in a different form. But we're going to go and look at the Minster. It's a magnificent medieval building. Again, it shows the glory of ancient England. We're in the York Railway Museum, the National Railway Museum. We're looking at some of the great locomotives of the Victorian era. They were really powerful trains, really great examples of British engineering. Of course, we led the world in those days. The quality of our railway engineering was unparalleled. We exported these engines throughout the world. In fact, we industrialised the world through the export of these engines. We sent them to India, South America, all over Europe, across Africa. The British built railways and sent the locomotives to work those railways. And this was the glorious age of British engineering. That's all on display here at York National Railway Museum. This is fantastic. We're actually in the heart of the engine. These are really impressive, these steam engines. Perfect condition. Real beast. You can imagine these powering their way through the English countryside. And it's interesting that York became the centre of the railway industry in Britain. The link between Scotland and the south, between the north and the west. And you can imagine this station in its heyday. Crowds boarding the trains. People used to dress up for their railway journeys. First class, second class, third class and fourth class. And it was quite an event to go on the trains. And these engines, they revolutionised Britain. They linked us all together through an amazing railway network. And it would have been fantastic to see these guys in action, you know, pumping out their steam. And it's another great period of British history. I mean, when you look back, you come to York, you see the glory of British history, something to be celebrated. You know, something which we should be proud of, something which we want to maintain, you know. It's interesting, the sort of people that come to these railway museums tends to be almost uniquely British and European. So it has the attraction for people to celebrate our past, you know. Let's move on now. Yeah, everything moved by rail in the 19th century, including mail. We're in the mail train now. These are all the pigeonholes where the letters would be sorted, taken around the country. We've got the mail bags here. You can imagine how busy this was, a hive of activity. And of course, there would be other carriages carrying fish and flowers and all goods. All the goods of Britain were moved by the railways. It transformed this country. And we're in the York Museum, and you can just feel the atmosphere of Victorian England and Edwardian England before the arrival of the motor car. And it's an epoch in our history we can look back on and enjoy. It seemed to be an epoch which everyone wants to celebrate. There's something joyous about it. A time of hard work, a time of busyness, but a time of improvement, a time of greatness for our nation. And it's just, you can feel it here. It's tangible in a place like this. Move it a bit. This is a deluxe carriage, first class carriage, and this is how the other half lived in the 19th century. They had luxury, they had space, and elegant, very elegant. I quite like it, to be honest. I mean, probably there was quite a lot of class envy, but this is what people aspire to, and it's really pleasing to the eye. Another mighty steam engine, another impressive piece of engineering. This is a bit of a later model. Probably would have been just before the First World War. You can imagine this tearing down the track, steam flying from the funnel. Really mighty beast, this one. I would have loved to have ridden on this in its heyday. Imagine these pistons pushing away. Some horsepower in that. (1926). It's actually post First World War. Made in Horwich. These are the engines that impressed the world. They showed this supremeness of British engineering at the time. We were the workshop of the world. We were busy building these up and down the country, the banks of the Clyde, right through to the industrial heartland of Britain. We were turning out these mighty beasts. This is a true classic. One of Stephenson's early locomotives, probably from the 1830s, 1840s. It's been really well preserved and reconstructed, and it's here to show you a turning point in history when we left the age of the horse carriage and entered the realm of steam. This would have shocked the people of Britain when it was first moving down the tracks. Its speed and its power. And it's well preserved here. It's here for everyone to admire. All aboard! We're off on the Chinese Express. This beast used to cross China, right across from north to south, from east to west. 3 million square miles. It was built in the late 1920s, and it was the supreme example of British engineering, which was sent all over the world. This one went to China, as I say. Many others went to India, went to South America, and they transported the goods and the people of the globe. This was the glory days of British engineering. What a magnificent train, what a powerhouse. This is the thing about Britain in those days. It was a place of power and of strength, a place of glory. And you just look at these wheels, they're so mighty. You know, you can imagine what they could pull. They could pull anything that was going. These trains, I mean, this is an earlier example here. This is an older train. This is probably 1850s to 60s. Very elegant train, very pretty. And again, would have crisscrossed this nation, crisscrossed the empire. We exported trains to America, to Africa, right across the globe. These are glory days of British industry, days which shaped the modern world. Great to see. Look at the size and power of this wheel and the pistons. This could pull some weight, this train, at some speed as well. A mighty beast indeed. Exported to China, but it's now come home to rest at the National Railway Museum in York. And amazing to see it. Another mighty locomotive, the Evening Star. It was actually the last locomotive built for the steam age. The last steam train on British Railways, built in 1959. It's so powerful. But sadly, it was farewell to this form of technology, and there are the impersonal diesel trains which replace it. I miss these beasts. I miss this sort of display of power and glory. Look at all these locomotive engines built in Britain. the railway workshops of the nation, all on display here. What a glorious sight that must have been when this whole fleet of steam trains crisscrossed the nation, transporting people and goods of every description. What a sight that must have been, the heyday of steam. It would have been so exciting to have seen it all. These engines are truly beautiful works, the works of art, you know, as well as great pieces of engineering. There's a class about them and a quality. And they represented their age, the golden age of Britain, right up until 1960, when the final steam train was put into service. It's a great collection here at York. These are beautiful engines. The Duchess of Hamilton, built in 1938, just before the Second World War, was built to celebrate the coronation of 1936. Magnificent steam engine. And this was its sister, the Mallard, again built to celebrate the coronation. Again, the heyday of steam, truly at its awesome, most awesome best. There's real power in these engines, real speed. Must have been a joy to travel on those trains. Just magnificent, aren't they, to look at, and just to imagine what they were like when they were rolling across the British countryside. You would have been as a kid, you would have been so excited to run out and see the steam train. You can imagine the whole village coming to the fence to watch the Duchess of Hamilton fly past. Of course, we're part of a huge fleet which was operating in this country, the golden age of trains. We're coming on to hallowed ground now, one of the holiest places in England. Place where there's been reverence and worship for over 1,000 years. This street is known as the Shambles. We're in the heart of Old York here. In fact, this is the oldest street in the whole of Europe. It's hardly changed since the 14th century. You can see the ancient Tudor buildings, pre-Tudor, with the timber still hanging over. See how narrow the street is? Gives you a real sense of the history of York here. We've come from the Minster. And we're now in the heart of Old York, which has been superbly conserved. And it's still got an atmosphere of an ancient town. And this is something a little bit special. And it does make you proud to be British. It makes you proud that we've managed to continue this for so long. And long may it continue. We hope that one day our children and grandchildren will have the chance to appreciate this, the glories of Old England. Okay, we just left the cathedral and we've been attended the evensong. It's very traditional Anglican service, very peaceful, very relaxing, and we did some Bible readings. Jeremiah 5:20 talks about the dangers that people face. So, but in the midst of those dangers, there's still hope, there's still peace, and there's the eternal Spirit which continues. So yeah, it's been good to come to York today and just absorb the history of this place.
Well, we've finished our tour today, and behind me here is the side and that's the top of York Minster Cathedral. And you know, we've had a great time today. Paul said some great things in the railways and some outside of some of the historic buildings, and this is our history. York, what a place, what a historic city, and somewhere to be proud of, and it makes me proud to be British. I went to a service in this church tonight, and as you can see, the people have just left the service. There was hymns being sang at the service, and it's great. Anyway, I hope